Tonight's breakthrough stimulus bill compromise came at the very end of a very dramatic day of legislative stimulus wrangling, including the drama of the expected return to the Senate of its ailing liberal lion, Ted Kennedy, fighting to survive brain cancer. He is said to be traveling back to Capitol Hill to cast his ballot. Today's drama on Capitol Hill started with drama of the worst kind in economic indicators. Unemployment claims for January were 598,000. That's the largest one-month job loss in 35 years. You can file that under reality, sobering. Or don't. Actually, don't. If you would rather make political hay than try to fix this problem. Don't admit to the sobering reality of just how urgent this crisis is if, instead of coming up with the most effective way to solve it, you'd like to use it to get your what would Ronald Reagan do ideological dance card punched for political purposes at the expense of your country.
To try to rush this through this week, Harry Reid has said you guys aren't going home until we pass it this week. The biggest bill in history, they want to do it in 1 week.
And now we're told by the majority leader we need to hurry up? Hurry up is what's got us in this trouble.
We need to slow down, take a time out, and get it right.
Delay is preferable to error. Let's not rush into doing this the wrong way.
No rushing. No need to hurry. Slow down. I hate to be the one to call bullpucky here, but bullpucky. We're in this economic crisis because people aren't buying enough stuff. There's supply, but there's no demand. People aren't buying. Every job that gets lost, every day a job is lost, means that someone's got even less money to buy stuff, which means that less stuff gets bought, which is worse for business, which begets more unemployment. This is something that snowballs. The timing does matter. There is urgency. There is actually, literally, scientifically, economically, a big need to hurry. It's not a matter of perception. It's the truth. And while we're calling bullpucky here, as we consider exactly why this stimulus bill had to be watered down to a 58-42 spending to tax cut compromise that compromises the likelihood of this rescue actually doing any good, consider the arguments by the side that demanded the watering down. Arguments that, frankly, would get you flunked out of Econ 101, and that should get you heckled by people who are losing their jobs.
This so-called stimulus bill is really just a long laundry list of Washington big government spending programs, not anything focused or disciplined that will really create jobs in the short term in this economy.
Again, I'm sorry to be the one to say here, but bullpucky. Republicans may not like it, but the way to create jobs fast is through spending. The point of the spending is to save jobs by spending money, by buying stuff, which is the thing that isn't happening in the economy right now. How many times does this have to be said? In some cases, the way to create jobs and to save jobs is to directly provide them. Jobs doing stuff like repairing roads and building schools and fixing bridges. Literally giving money to people who will spend it in the economy that needs people to be spending money in it. That is stimulus. Government spending programs. That is actually what economic stimulus is, technically. Can I get a little help here, Mr. President?
Then you get the argument, well, this is not a stimulus bill, this is a spending bill. What do you think a stimulus is?
Yes.
That's the whole point.
Yes.
No, seriously. That's the point.
That's the point. Now, the Republican response to President Obama came in part from the one senator whose economic ideas were really embarrassingly, thoroughly, directly rejected this past November.
The whole point, Mr. President, is to enact tax cuts and spending measures that truly stimulate the economy.
Bullpucky. Bullpucky. I'm sorry. Anytime somebody says tax cuts when they're talking about stimulus, they ought to be laughed at. Not because you're mean and you laugh at people who are dumb, but because it's dumb. Despite that economically inconvenient truth that tax cuts are way less stimulative than just spending, Republicans have just been running with it anyway.
What my amendment essentially would do is say that $936 billion ought to be divided evenly among people who file income tax returns in this country. There are 182 million filers, all of whom could have a significant tax cut if you took a $936 billion price tag and divided it up among those 182 million filers.
But what would it be for? We're actually talking about an economic stimulus package, not $936 billion worth of tax rebates, which frankly is a neat idea, but it's not a stimulus. This is bullpucky. According to Moody's.com, every dollar spent on non-refundable tax rebates generates about $1.02 of economic activity. Every dollar spent on, say, infrastructure, which Senator Thune would like to gut, creates $1.59 in economic activity. Why would we waste 57 cents on the dollar? Why would we waste our money on tax rebates when actual spending works better? A stimulus bill like the one we have ended up with as of now, which is 42% tax cuts, gets the American people 42% punked. It is a waste at a time that we can't really afford to waste. And we can't afford to dither. We need economic stimulus, which frankly, I'm sorry to say, it's spending. Another idea being offered up by a conservative but bipartisan group of senators was reportedly to attract Republican support for this measure by cutting funding for food stamps. What is the single most productive stimulus that we know of? Food stamps. Every dollar spent on food stamps puts $1.73 back into the economy. We don't know of anything that is more stimulative than that. Giving people who have very limited income extra money is like stimulus on steroids. That money will be spent, almost every dime of it. And that's the point. Cutting food stamps funding to attract Republican support is proof positive that the Republicans are not trying to come up with an effective stimulus here. If your house is on fire and you call the fire department and your fire department tells you to pour gasoline on the flames, they're not actually making a good faith effort to help you put out the fire. They're not a good fire department. If you're working up policy to fix an economic crisis, which is characterized by there being no spending in the economy, and someone in that debate says, okay, but cut the spending out of the rescue plan, they're bad at making policy. And you know what? It matters when you're wrong. A whopping proportion of the Republican rhetoric about stimulus is wrong. It's wrong. It's total economic bullpucky. It's just wrong. The time is now to take the radical step as Americans, as civic-minded Americans concerned about our future. It's time to take the radical step of privileging correct information over incorrect information. The stakes are too high to let the bullpucky survive in this debate. If you are wrong from here on out, you should lose the argument. And you should lose your political potency. Form a Flat Earthers Club or something where you talk enthusiastically to each other about your made-up economic ideas that aren't based in reality. But get out of the way of the people who are actually trying to save the country.